Hey, it's time for some video sketchbooking. In this video, I'm going to be doing some photo ref practice, but before I get to that referential painting, I just want to talk about workflow a little bit. And in case you're wondering what I mean when I say that, it's basically how you tackle a piece of art, how you approach it and everything like that. So I'm drawing a couple examples here. You can see this first one. I'm drawing a circle, which is kind of a foreground object, and then I'm drawing the background afterward. And you can see kind of how long that took versus this example where I'm drawing the background first and then just quickly drawing the red circle on top of it. And that was a lot easier, a lot faster. So a lot of times workflow is about making things faster. Like quality wise, you can make it look the same if you spend enough time, but we want to make things fast and easy. So we're going to be working back to front for the most part, and that's usually a good idea. And you can see I'm making another example right here with my little sphere of color. This kind of a natural highlighted sphere with some color thrown in. And then I'm going to do one here where I'm working, instead of like the first one, I'm going to be working from light to dark trying to make a sphere. Which is kind of more difficult, and you'll see it's going to be very fuzzy around the edge because I don't have that darkness that's naturally in place around the edge and stuff like that. It's also a little more difficult, and it kind of took more time, and it felt more awkward. So in general, when I'm working on just a small little chunk of section, like a box or an arm or something, I'm going to work from dark to light. But the priority in terms of like what I'm working on is definitely going to be back to front, because that makes a huge difference in just how easy it is in terms of putting a background and then working on top of it. So now, while I do this, I'm going to be working on my background. For starters, you can see I'm kind of filling in some sky stuff and some, basic grains, just so I have some tones to work with. And you can see I'm kind of working extremely small here. This is actually not like, messed with in video form or anything. This is the actual size you're looking at, is the size I was working at, and that just lets you focus on the whole picture. Like seeing things in that thumbnail size really lets you kind of try to get your colors correct. But anyway, let me jump way back and talk a little bit about what I'm doing. This is a photo ref, and I wanted to do some photo ref practice of stuff, and I thought what better thing to do than armor, because I just did a piece on armor and I didn't feel that comfortable with my armor rendering skills, and I didn't think it was quite up to par. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting to do something with armor. You may have noticed I did a clothing folds tutorial right before I did the design lab, and that's because I entirely expected it to be something with like robes or like drapery, and I thought the character was going to have stuff like that, so I was kind of mentally getting prepared for that. But instead you guys wanted something with armor, so that kind of threw me off, and I was like, oh, okay, we'll try some armor stuff, but I should have practiced more first. But anyway, I figured afterward, I was like, oh, that wasn't that great. And metal clothing is something that a lot of us don't have. We generally don't have any armor in our closet. Maybe there's a couple of us that do. But just in regards to that, not having that natural experience and seeing this in everyday life, this is a great example of when you want to find a photo reference. You can't really do it from life, unless you go to like a Renaissance fair or something. So using a photo reference is going to be a great way to practice stuff like this. So I got this reference, you can see on the left side, from and alt no on DeviantArt. I just did a quick DeviantArt search on stock photos because I knew I was going to be sharing this in video. Otherwise I wouldn't care if it's a stock photo or whatever if I wasn't sharing it with people. But since I'm going to share it, I want to make sure it's a stock photo that someone is, saying that it's okay for people to use for artistic experiences and, artistic, just kind of practice and in their art and stuff like that. So this was a stock photo. They had some great armor in their DeviantArt gallery, some great stock photos of different armors and kind of poses, and they were in natural light, which was good. They weren't in a museum or anything. They were out in obviously a foresty area, so that's great. I thought this would be a great reference just based on those things. It also has some skin tone in there, so I didn't want something that was all metal. I wanted to break it up a little bit. So you got some wood with that spear thingy, Maybe that's called a halberd. I don't know. But yeah, I got a nice mix of stuff going on. So anyway, that is the story of why I'm doing this. But you can see right now, I've kind of fallen behind a little bit in talking, but I'm doing all this crazy foliage. Like these leaves are just scattered everywhere, and I have it sped up, so it just kind of looks like they're being, smattered across. But what's actually happening, and this is kind of my own, I don't know, some dumb technique that I've been using since I started using the thick and thin pen and painter, and that is that I'm just tapping at my tablet with my stylus, and I'll show you what that looks like. You can see that right here. So I'm just tapping quickly, and because of that randomness in the way Painter tries to deduce which direction you're going in, you kind of get a lot of little random shapes and things. So I've been using that for like foliage and leafy stuff ever since I first started using that tool. And I actually tried a couple different methods because there was so much foliage I was trying to get. I wanted to get as much detail going in. You can see the photo just has really dense, leaves everywhere, and I was trying to get as much in. So I actually tried a second approach, which was holding the pen, or stylus, I should call it, holding the stylus in one hand and tapping it with my other hand. So that was my two-handed method, and you can see that here. And it didn't work out that great, but it was kind of interesting. I'm sure I could perfect my technique, and I'll be like the Tom Morello of Wacom tablets. But anyway, that was a dumb reference. That was a weird reference. While I'm doing this picture-in-picture nonsense, I just wanted to make note of some other slight change in my tablet setup, and that is that I'm now taping my paper down on just one side, and I think that will reduce waviness and maybe keep the paper, lasting longer, unless of course someone starts like ripping at your paper or biting at it. I don't want to name any names, but someone who's sitting on my head seems to constantly be messing with my tablet. But back to the painting, it seems we're just about done with the background. I think it looks good enough. Obviously, it's not quite as dense and, not photorealistic. And the grass is really simple in my version. It doesn't have that texture to it. So I'm sure there are tricks you can do to add that texture quickly with like different brush techniques. It'd probably be easier in Photoshop or something. But let's move right ahead and start actually doing our armor. So that was the main purpose for our photo reference. I kind of got sidetracked by drawing all this pretty landscape because it's fun and relaxing to draw leafy trees and landscapey stuff. But here we can see I'm actually starting to do my armor, and I'm starting with the head. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. It's not probably going to be the exact same proportions as the photo. Just one of the side effects of, just eyeballing it loosely. But you can see I was kind of hesitant and I was kind of getting nervous because like right when you're starting out rendering metal, it kind of looks weird before you get all your colors on. Like once you just get like the gray colors or like maybe part of the highlight, it looks a little off. It doesn't quite look right. But eventually, once you get all your colors on there and everything's, kind of working, it starts to look a lot better. So you just have to trust in yourself. And the thing that I was like questioning was whether like my colors were right or not. Because one important thing I should mention, and I think it's an important thing to remember anytime you're doing photo references, is that I'm not doing any color picking from the photo. My color wheel and the little triangle inside that wheel, those are like tools to me. They're very important tools, and it's important that I get better with these tools. So one thing I'm practicing when I'm doing photo ref is obviously, learning and stuff like that, but I'm also practicing my brush control, and I'm practicing using my tools. So the colors, the color wheel over there, that's an important tool for me to get comfortable with and to feel really good about using. So I'm not doing any color picking, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and I'm using my color wheel to decide if I need to go warmer or colder or lighter value or darker value. So that's always an important thing to do, and it's just like kind of compounding the things you learn. So if you're just color picking from a photo, you're really missing out on a lot of the education you could be getting from doing a photo ref practice. So there's no color picking, there's no kind of anything like that. There's no real interaction with the photo other than it being there, just for mainly your purposes so you can see what I'm trying to do. But there's no interaction with it whatsoever in terms of brushes or the program itself. So anyway, while I mentioned some stuff about drawing armor, I slightly mentioned it in the last video, although I didn't highlight it in any proper way. But there's a general strategy or stereotype to shiny metal, and that is that the blues are going to be on top where you're getting your sky reflected, and then the warmer earth tones are going to be where you're reflecting the ground, or whatever environment you're in. That's just a kind of general thing for outdoor settings. So obviously that wouldn't apply for indoor stuff, but basically, if you understand the metal, it's kind of like a mirror and it's reflecting the world. So if you just look at, let's say, the helmet, you can see there's like a sky and then there's a horizon area, and that kind of has some warmest colors. And then deep under that horizon, you kind of get your darker tones, but which are also earth-based and stuff like that. But you can see there's also can be some blue. Look around his chin area, and you might notice that stronger bluer color, and that's because it's reflecting the light off the shoulder armor. So you kind of have to keep thinking about everything and putting all that stuff together, reflections from the armor, but otherwise it's just like a mirror. So that's how you think about it. Bring in your warm earth tones on the bottom, your cooler tones on the top, or if you were in a particular setting, say the sky was orange and the ground was purple or whatever, then you'd be, putting orangish colors on top and purple on the bottom. But that's just kind of how armor works, like a complicated mirror, and stuff like that. One other thing I can mention is that doing like paneling on metal stuff, you might think about like those seams in the armor and stuff. And if you weren't doing it from photo reference, when you think about a seam in a piece of metal, you might think about representing it as like a black line or a darker line. But a lot of the times, that seam is mainly going to be visible to you through a highlight. So you might think about using a highlight. So you can see on the seam, like on the side of the chest piece, there's like a seam there, and I just used the highlight from the back of the armor, and I just kind of did a quick seam using that. And you kind of just have to think about which way your seam is going to be best represented. So if something's like in shadow and there's not going to be a light bouncing off it, you can do a seam with like a darker tone, like a black. Like you can see around the elbow area, there's some seams that are mainly just shown by doing a black line. But otherwise, if it's like on the top of things or it's getting a lot of light, you're probably going to show your seam by kind of drawing the lightest highlight, the super speculars across the seam. So anyway, whew, that was distracting. You can see here I'm messing with the face, and since this is just a neutral kind of outdoorsy setting, it's very comfortable for me to just draw a quick skin tone and not have to worry too much about it. So the face went fairly quickly. I just brought in some, basic things like the redness. You can see it on the cheeks and stuff. And that's kind of all standard stuff that you might have seen in the painting faces video. There's also some redness or, more warmer colors, more darker colors, like on the nose area. There's like slightly purplish, reddish tones. So once again, that's kind of like you've seen me doing other stuff, but since this is realistic, it's more subtle. You're not going to have a bright red nose or a strong red nose. This is in life, but you do need to pay attention that all those like exaggerations that I do in other paintings, they're all based on something. I'm not just making the nose red, for fun. It's based on the nose actually being more red and those kind of shadows around the cheeks and everything being more red. So you get those tones and stuff like that. So I keep getting distracted by going back into the foliage and stuff like that because I always want to add more color and stuff. And just to make a note, you can see how I'm kind of forming these things, and also how I form the background and all those leaves and stuff. Generally, when I was doing those leaves, I was working from dark to light. So I did a lot of the darkest leaves in the background, and then I did just like right when I was done with all the leaves, and I felt like there was a good cover. That's when I went in with some bright yellow tones and stuff like that, and really added those highlights of leaves here and there, and those really make the whole scene pop. They add a lot of life to it, just those highlights and things like that. So I think this is sped up even more. I think it might be like I really sped this part up just because it's more of the same. And once I have all those colors established on my armor, you can see like the headpiece, the helmet, I should say, and then the shoulder pad, and then the chest piece. And I think if you look at those sections, they pretty much cover every color you're gonna need for the rest of the armor. So there wasn't much, thinking about my colors or anything. It was basically just plugging things in from elsewhere on my armor, color picking from what I had already established. So you can see these bright highlights, which are kind of similar to what was seen like on the top of the shoulder pad or the top of the helmet, mainly the shoulder pad. And I'm bringing those into that kind of hip covering area. I don't know the proper names for all this armor stuff, but that hip area and stuff like that. And while I'm rendering this out, I don't think there's anything too important to say about it. It's mainly just filling in the colors that I've mentioned and filling this out a bit more, working from dark to light for the most part. Each particular section, I'm not just taking one general dark tone, I'm trying to take a dark tone from that section. So for this hip part, I'm just taking like a dark blue versus say the darker tone that I used on the chest piece or that forearm area. But this part of the painting was a bit straightforward, so I will take a moment to talk a little bit about the channel, the YouTube channel that is Cynic's Design. I've been messing around a little bit with adding ads here and there, so don't freak out if you see an ad on a video. I've just kind of mainly been curious as to, what those will bring about and stuff like that. Just curious as to how they work. So other things I like to mess with on my channel. Sometimes I like to check my analytics, and if you're curious, I'll let you know that about 75% of the viewers that watch these videos are male. At least that's how it's generally been, except when Ahoy NATO gave me his shout out. I think that week it actually completely switched over and it was like 65% female. So that's interesting. So if you're new to the channel, I'd just like to say hello, ladies. No, actually, I just wanted to say that a lot of the videos on this channel are driven by viewer recommendations, so always feel free to recommend like what you want to see or what you don't want to see, or if you like a video series or a certain video, just let me know, because that helps me, tailor what I show you guys. And it's a lot of fun for me too. I like getting recommendations because it keeps me somewhat, guessing as to what I'll be doing next. And I like to kind of not know what I'm going to be doing next. It makes it more fun for me. And I keep a text file on my desktop that has like a long list of different video ideas and stuff like that. And I always put in viewer recommendations onto the list, no matter what they are, just so I have them there. So that's just what I wanted to mention. Always be, willing to participate and stuff. And I'll probably be doing more viewer interaction videos because you guys seem to enjoy the last design lab where I got thumbnails from you guys. So I'll be doing a lot of stuff like that. And since that's just kind of how I am, they'll probably be different, and they'll probably be, have slightly different methods each time. I have some stupid ideas that I'll probably be testing out and stuff like that. But let's get back to the painting. I think I actually spent more time on this photo ref painting than I spent on any other painting I've done in a video, which is kind of weird and crazy. But I'm pretty sure that's actually true. I think I spent like at least 3 hours off and on my digital painting. I didn't do it all in one sitting, but like in a couple different sittings, maybe a few different sittings. I did like... Yeah, I'm gonna guess like 3 hours. I spent 30 minutes alone just on that background painting with all the trees and leaves and stuff, so that might give you some idea. But yeah, You might be noticing now, as I was certainly noticing when I was doing this, that I'm completely coming off the page. My figure of this knight wound up being way larger than the one in the photo, and that wasn't really on purpose. It's just kind of how it came about. Obviously, the head must have been bigger, and then it just kind of expanded from there. Everything was suddenly bigger, and you can see he's just falling off the canvas right now, which kind of looks crazy. And I left it like that. I'm like, screw it. I'm just not going to draw the background, and I'll just have his foot coming right off the page here. So that was kind of an interesting change. But I think one of the things that really brought like the armor look to life was all those little rivets, and those are completely like stupidly easy to add to the metal. It was basically just a dark dot with a light dot on top of it, and suddenly you have like a rivet that looks three-dimensional. I think they're rivets. I don't know if there's a proper term, but you know, those little round things sticking up like in the seams and stuff like that. And those just added a ton of like, I don't know, personality and like realism to it, because otherwise it just kind of looks, you know, like a painting, or it just doesn't have that detailed feel, and it doesn't have that right scale. But when you add things like that, those little rivets, suddenly it has a ton of scale. So here you can see the final thing I'm kind of adding is this his weapon here, I don't know, his spear. I called it a halberd, but I'm not sure if that's what it actually is. But let's stick with that. It's like a little axe on a staff. um, and you can see I kind of just went real simple with like a nice wooden color, and just kind of, it took me a while to get my line proper, but I got my line. And then I just added the highlight, and then just went in for the head part with basically just color picking from the armor, because I figured it was probably pretty much the same thing. So that's about it. I added some craziness to the bottom, like where the grass was, because I didn't want to just leave it, you know, blank. I was just kind of experimenting with the Sargent brush, and I added a lot of like streaks, like dripping paint type effect, just for fun, just because I was messing with it. But here you can see I am completely done, and I'm just kind of writing some stuff so I know what this was. I'm writing ref, which is short for reference. I keep saying ref, but hopefully you know that means reference. Ref armor study, and there we go, making it nice and presentable. And then on the other side, I'm just gonna quickly write that this was by and alt no, who had the original photo. And I wrote after and alt no, because that's what the cool people do when you do a study. You write after instead of, you know, writing like original by. You write that your painting was after and alt no. Actually, you normally do that when you're like doing a study of a painting, not of a photo. But you know, I'm just like being super artsy, I guess. So I think that's everything, and thank you guys for watching. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, even though it wasn't really so much about being creative, but it was about using the tool. And for the record, the entire thing was done with the thick and thin pen. Everything from the background to the leaves to the armor, just everything was rendered with that tool. So reference is not only help you improve with your stuff, but don't forget, you improve with your tools a lot. You'll get better with your brushes. So just a great idea all around, reference paintings. Maybe you guys can do maybe find some armor pictures of your own and do some reference paintings, and you can feel free to share them in the comments, you know, see how they go. Maybe I'll have crits or comments to leave back at you. But thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.